Hi, friends. We're back with American Miscellany, and this book is so miscellaneous. I don't know what this beautiful engraving is doing here. It is entitled Blackwell Penitentiary, and it's so random, so miscellaneous. It has nothing to do with the previous essay, which was called Alston's Aphorisms, and a really interesting little read there, essay number 160. And our next essay number 161, is on Cincinnati and has nothing, I don't know, maybe it has something to do with Blackwell Penitentiary. I've never read this book before, so I'm reading it for the first time with you. We're learning together. And so let's learn a little bit about Cincinnati. I hope you guys got a great view there of Blackwell Penitentiary. It's a beautiful engraving, probably not a beautiful vacation, but really, really lovely artistry there. So let's learn together. Here we are, American Miscellany, published 1865. We are now on page 418, reading essay number 161, Cincinnati. When Columbus discovered the New World, he was in search of a western route to Cathay and India, whence he expected to bring back, if not treasures of gold and gems, intelligence of the wonderful land Marco Polo had described. It was not until long after the discovery of the continent of North and South America that it was ascertained that a new region, broad as the Atlantic, lay between the ocean and the Indian Sea, as the Pacific was then called. So deep-rooted was this belief that the French colonists in Canada, long after they had begun to be formidable to their English and Hollandish neighbors, in spite of many disappointments, followed the tracery of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers in the full confidence that this mighty current could end only in the Western Sea. They could not realize that nature in America had always acted on a grander scale than they were used to, and would have laughed if told that not far above the mouth of the Ohio was another great artery, which by its tributaries watered one valley, the superficies of which was larger than all Europe. They, with their limited views, were the discoverers to Europe of the Ohio, which in the language of the tribe that dwelt on the bank from which the white man first beheld it, signified beautiful water. This the French translated into their own language, and by the term of La Belle River it was long known in the histories of the Jesuit and Franciscan missions. Which until the land of the Ohio watered became the property of the second North American race, were its only chronicles. Second North American race. Not until a later day did it become known to the English colonists, and then so slightly that even in the reign of Charles II, authority was given to the British governor of Virginia, Sir William Berkeley, to create a hereditary order of knighthood, with high privileges and brilliant insignia, eligibility to which depended on the aspirant having crossed the Allegheny Ridge, and added something to the stock of intelligence of the region beyond, the title to all of which had been conferred by the royal patent on the colony at Jamestown. Possessed of Canada, with strongly defended positions at Fort Duquesne, Pittsburgh, and Fort Chartres, near the confluence of the Ohio and Mississippi, with the even then important city of New Orleans, the wily statesmen of the reign of Louis XIV conceived the plan of enclosing the English colonies in a network of fortifications, and ultimately of controlling the continent. So cherished was this policy that treaties made in Europe between the crowns of France and England never extended their influence to America, and for almost a century continued a series of contests during which Montcalm, de Levis, Wolfe, and Braddock distinguished themselves and died. The result is well known. Canada became English. The northern point d'appui of the system was lost, and the Ohio was no longer under their control. This prologue to the beautiful engraving of Cincinnati is given because though Pittsburgh and Louisville are important cities, Cincinnati is the undoubted queen of the river. Okay, so it's possible that the engraving was mixed up or something, that maybe somewhere we have an engraving of Cincinnati, perhaps, along with an essay about Blackwell Penitentiary, probably. We'll see. All right. For a long while, Cincinnati was merely the depot of the Indians and fur trade, the most valuable of the products of which required it to be transported across the mountains and through forests to the seaboard. At that time, Cincinnati presented a strange appearance. The houses were of logs, and here and there, through the broad streets, its founders, so providently prepared, were seen the hunter in his leathern jerkin, the Indian warrior in full paint, and the husbandman returning home from his labors. Almost from the establishment of the Northwest Territory, Cincinnati had been the home of the governor, and it was the residence of St. Clair, long the only delegate in Congress of the whole Northwest. A wilderness then, but now teeming with 3 millions of inhabitants, and sending to Washington 34 representatives. Cincinnati was the point de départ of many of the expeditions against the Indians between the Revolution and the War of 1812. When that war broke out, it acquired a new importance. Military men replaced the hunter and the Indian, and every arrival brought a reinforcement of troops. Awesome. From it, Taylor and Croghan marched with General Harrison northward, and to it the victorious army returned from the Thames. When peace returned, a new activity was infused into Cincinnati. The vast disbursements made by the government had attracted thither many adventurers. Then commenced the era of bateau navigation and the advent of a particular race of men, of whom no trace remains. Rude boats were built and freighted with produce, which descended to the river of New Orleans, where the cargo was disposed of, and the boat itself broken up and sold. The crew, after a season of dissipation, returned homeward by land through the country inhabited by the Choctaws and Chickasaws, and the yet wilder region infested by thieves and pirates. It was no uncommon thing for the boatmen never to return. Exposure to danger made them reckless, and they were often seen floating down the bosom of the stream with the violin sounding merrily, but with their rifles loaded and resting against the gunwales, ready to be used whenever emergency arose. All the West even now rings with traditions of the daring of this race, and the traveler on the waters of the West often has pointed out to him the scene of their bloody conquests and quarrels. The era of steam began, and this state of things passed away. The mighty discovery of Fulton created yet more activity in the West, and a current of trade second to none on the continent, except perhaps to those of New York and Philadelphia, sprung from it. All the states of Kentucky and Ohio began to fill up. The farmers and planters crowded to Cincinnati with their produce, and the character of the population changed. The day of the voyager was gone, and lines of steamboats crowded its wharf. The peculiar character of the country around it, teeming with the sustenance for animals and grazing, made it the center of a peculiar business. which, unpoetical as it may seem, doubled every year until in 1847 it amounted to more than the value of the cotton crop of the whole Atlantic frontier. Other branches of industry also grew up. Shipyards lined the banks of the river, and more than one stately vessel has first floated on the bosom of the Ohio in front of Cincinnati, been freighted at its wharves, and sailed thence to the ocean, never to return to the port of its construction. Long before the reign of the merchant princes began, stately churches, colleges, and commodious dwellings had arisen and replaced the hut of the early settlers, so that Cincinnati, with the exception of Philadelphia, is become the most regular and beautiful city of the Union. The scene of the accumulation of large fortunes, cultivation has followed in their train, so that it is difficult for one who first visits it from the east to realize that he is 700 miles from the seaboard. Fulton had, by his discovery, overcome the difficulties of communication and opened a market for its immense products. But yet another discovery was to contribute to its prosperity. By means of the magnetic telegraph, communication between the seaboard of the Atlantic and the lakes is more easy than between New York and Brooklyn, and with the whole West, Cincinnati has acquired new importance. It cannot but continue to advance and acquire yet more influence than it now has.